we do some ASMR? Should we try to whisper?
No, sketch. I will try my
Pretend
best.
like you watch my podcast.
Yeah, I did
least.
watch it. I prepared
No, you
diligently. Ended up not getting it anywhere, and just reapplied the next year in 2022, and then I got accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. And someone told me to write my essays like 18 to 19 drafts. I probably did like 50 or 60 drafts, to be honest. This summer has actually been a big help for me to kind of come to terms with I'm going to be bad at a lot of stuff on the way to like achieving what I want to do in the next 5 or 10 years. And I'm no longer playing a game of chess where I have to like plan out every strategic move. I'm more playing like Tetris, but like there's blocks coming down and you just have to figure out what blocks do I have and how do I fit this piece into this piece. And it's a little bit less linear in nature. I think the audience wants to know. I feel like I'm going to flip this a little bit, the script here.
This is a really unconventional.
This is an unusual start.
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
I'm trying to mix it up for you.
Yeah,
you know?
I appreciate
I'm trying to keep
that. It light. Welcome to Cherie's Corner, a podcast where we dive into the topic of career and hear from my friends and guests who are killing it in the business world, so we can learn from their lessons, their wisdoms, and their mistakes. I'm your host, Cherie, and I'm currently a business school student at Stanford University. I previously had roles in tech and venture capital. In this episode, I interview my Stanford classmate, Ty Greenberg, and he kind of interviews me. Before business school, Ty worked in legal tech, and he toyed with the idea of going to law school or business school. He shares about his application journey and how he applied to MBA programs twice. He wasn't admitted into his dream target schools on his first try, so he redid his application, wrote to the admissions committees, and was then admitted to Stanford, Harvard, and MIT business schools the second year he applied. He talks more about the grit, the perseverance, and some of the tactical things that he did on that journey. And finally, Ty brought some zest to the conversation and came in with questions for me. This podcast is a little bit more fun and out there. I hope you enjoyed this last episode of the season. Let's dive in.
You should introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. If we haven't met, my name is Cherie, and this is...
I'm Ty. Nice to meet you. Like, you're doing this podcast. Yeah. Obviously, you have a huge audience. Everyone likes you. You're amazing. Like, why a podcast? And why now?
I've created short form content for the last 3 years, and like the number one comment that I get on TikTok or Instagram is like follow-up questions. And so basically like 1.5 minute long videos are not really enough. It's not enough time to really say what I want to say and really be giving the advice and information that I want to be sharing.
Like kind of double clicking on that, what does that sort of like unlock for you?
I think it's all about developing a relationship with my audience and making sure it feels more like a community. And I think long form posts offers...
People like it.
Yeah, so that people can understand who I am. I think it's really hard to get a feel for someone in just like a minute long video.
So on that topic, I think the audience demands to know, but who is Cherie Luo? Like who is she? You're very caring. I feel like everyone knows you kind of like in our class, but maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I think this is a tough question.
Yeah, who is Cherie?
Yeah, who is she?
Everyone's asking. Yeah.
No one's asking.
A lot of people are asking.
No.
So like my impression of you has always been someone who is very curious about other people. Where do you think like that curiosity comes from?
The curiosity comes from the desire to learn. Tying it back to your original question about the podcast. Yeah. Like I feel so lucky to, one, be at Stanford GSB and have such amazing classmates that are like doing me a favor by coming on my podcast, but selfishly, like I get to ask all the questions and learning more about them, where they came from, what are their aspirations, what do they want to do after the GSB, and usually people's aspirations are like these
pretty mind-blowing.
These huge inspiring goals that I'm like, wow, our classmates are truly incredible. So I think I also learn best when people explain things.
Okay. Are you like an auditory learner? Do you learn better from like hearing things versus reading them?
Yes.
Okay. So you're hearing. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
You're like,
period.
yes. Yeah.
No, I'm definitely an auditory learner more than a visual learner.
Okay. I'm the exact opposite. So I'm like fully visual.
Yeah.
So people can talk to me and I don't understand anything. It's terrible for classes. What is your goal for this podcast? Like best case. What is your vision for it?
Best case scenario, I think about impact. So like I really hope that this podcast really breaks open like gate-kept institutions.
Yeah.
some would say like Stanford,
yeah.
some would say like
these
Harvard.
Walled gardens, yeah.
Exactly,
yeah.
where there is a lot of like free information online. You know, if you just go on Stanford's website or Harvard's website, you just get so much of the statistics. Like 40% of our class is international.
You get like the GMAT, the GRE stuff, but you don't really know like what's going into the applications and like what these people are like in practice. Like,
exactly. Who are the people behind the statistics?
Who are we? Yeah.
Who are you?
Normal people.
Who are you? Who am I?
I'm Ty Greenberg. You're Cherie Luo. Yeah, we're good.
Exactly. But I really hope that the podcast expands to other roles, industries, and functions that are more like traditionally gatekept. Like, when I was in college, I was like, what is consulting?
I still don't know really what it is.
Well, I'm just like, do they just Google things all day? I mean, I remember as like an 18-year-old, like not really having the answer to that. And both my parents did not work in those
those industries, right? Yeah. I think that's like a really admirable objective in a lot of ways, because I know for me, when I came to Georgetown, I had no concept of what consulting was. I had no concept of investment banking, private equity, venture capital. All these things were really new for me, and it's been a big, like, over the last 5 years, you learn about all these industries, sometimes through the application process, sometimes from friends, but it's like if you don't come from a background where these things are just sort of like ambient knowledge, it's like a huge deficit, and it can be really hard to overcome those things.
Like when you ask a little kid what job do they want to do when they grow up,
typically they don't say private equity.
They say the jobs that are in their face, that are around them. And so they usually say like teacher,
astronaut,
doctor, firefighter. I mean,
astronaut space is pretty cool. Like,
maybe because they see it on TV. But I would say that like taking that metaphor into like high school and college. In college, it was really important for me to find mentors that worked on Wall Street, that worked in Silicon Valley, to really get that exposure of like, oh, this is what a career path could look like.
In that area, You realize like, oh my God, like if other people had exposure to this, like what all these different vehicles and like pathways for social mobility that could happen. So I think that's like a big unlock. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's why I'm so pro people posting about their work and their job.
Really,
Within,
Well, it can be toxic sometimes, though. Like, in some ways, right?
Say more.
Like on LinkedIn, you're like, oh, I'm so honored and proud to be like doing this thing.
It's the intent behind the posting.
Yeah.
And when people post, I was thinking more like on TikTok.
Yeah.
Or like Instagram, where it's more of like, I'm friends with a bunch of like education, like knowledge content creators in the law industry, talking about how to get into law school.
Yeah, they demystify it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So less like the brag, like boasting,
the humble brags,
exactly,
right? Yeah,
on
the
LinkedIn.
Classic humble brag,
And more like the educational, like I want to
content,
teach and unlock things for people.
So I think kind of like I want to shift topics a little bit. So
wait, what the heck?
No, we're gonna get into it. But so like you're someone that I've always thought was like very fashion forward, like very connected with Gen Z. I don't know if it's the interns that work with you on sort of your style and like selection, but like how do you, Cherie, like pick out outfits? Like what's your process?
Like fashion is really important to me. Growing up in New York, going to school in Manhattan, it's like being around fashion, and fashion as art, fashion as
culture. Is it like
culture.
An expression of yourself?
Totally. I mean, I don't know what I'm expressing
or like your mood
right now with this boring ass outfit. But no.
It says I am a podcast interviewer and I'm interviewing you right now. That's what your outfit says. So I think it works. Do you dress for an audience? Or you dress for yourself?
You dress for yourself. Well, I dress for myself.
Yeah. What about how you configure your day? Do you feel like you put a lot of time into thinking about how you set up your calendar and like your day-to-day activities?
I mean, maybe you know me better than I know myself, because I wouldn't have thought about that unless you...
Well, I'm just thinking about it,
unless you brought it up. But like I like to I'm very particular about my day, like waking up at a certain time. Going to work out at a certain time, and like being very consistent with that. And so if it means going to like workout class solo or like just alone, like I will wake up and go to the 6:30 a.m. class, shower right after, continue to intermittent fast. Like, I am pretty particular about, I guess, my habits in that way.
I know you have some questions for me, but like...
I have all my questions for you.
We haven't asked any of them yet, but like where have you had the most interesting conversations with total strangers?
That's assuming I talk to strangers.
I always talk to people in lines. I think it's something about the boredom and waiting. I've had really good conversations in lines.
Maybe that's because you're just really friendly too.
I am pretty friendly. I'm a people person.
And you have a very like open demeanor.
Really?
Yeah, and you have like a friendly face.
Maybe. It's like the opposite of like some people that have like a very punchable face. I don't have that.
So I'm from New York and I'm always in a rush.
Really?
And
yeah.
I'm
so you're like East Coast. It's like, let's go. Yeah.
So I've now adopted a West Coast mentality, but like growing up on the East Coast, it was very much like hustle and bustle. Like you just wouldn't strike up a conversation.
No. What is your favorite soup?
This is a hot take.
Yeah.
Gazpacho.
Gazpacho.
Yeah, like a watermelon tomato summer gazpacho with some mint.
I like that. I like that for you. What are your top 5 favorite soups? You have 5?
Okay, gazpacho.
Gazpacho's number 1. That's your top pick.
Arguably, is that like a soup?
Gazpacho is actually
a summer cold soup.
Some people might debate that being in the soup category. Actually.
No, it's for sure a soup.
It's for sure.
Yeah,
we'll have to double check that. We'll have the interns check that.
Yeah, someone fact check that. Yeah. I also really like Tom Kha soup.
You're naming really fancy soups here. I like that. But that's a great pick.
Yeah, Tom Kha.
Yeah.
It's like a more coconut, like it's coconutty, lemongrassy, very light. It's more like a broth.
I feel like we're learning a lot about Cherie Luo right now.
I like egg drop soup.
Egg drop. That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And then hot and sour. Hot and sour is really good. Okay. These are all like kind of Asian, except for the first one.
Yeah.
I really like bone broth.
Wow, bone broth.
Yeah,
okay.
Brothy.
Okay, I'll give you mine. So I gotta go with tomato soup as my number one pick.
Are yours all like American and
They're
are
pretty
mine
American,
all Asian?
Yeah, I guess.
And you're like Italian wedding.
Yeah. Well, I like tomato soup because I feel like
broccoli cheddar, tomato.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of optionality. You can put croutons in it. You can kind of take like a grilled cheese. I don't know if you ever like had a really good, and you can dip it in there.
Of course.
Put some chives. Lentil soup is my number 3. I love lentil soup. My dad loves lentil soup, so I picked up lentil soup.
These are hearty soups.
Lentil's very good.
These are very, very hearty and thick.
Yeah. And then I gotta go with miso soup. That's my 4th.
Miso.
Yeah, miso.
None of ours overlapped.
Yeah, we don't really have a lot. Okay. Do you believe aliens are real?
There's for sure extraterrestrial...
Terrestrial?
Terrestrial.
It's a hard one, yeah. Well, they found non-human biologics apparently on some sort of aircraft. What is your beige flag?
Could you define what a beige flag is?
It doesn't rise to the severity of a red flag, which would be something like that is a real ick or something that's bad. And then there's sort of the green flag, which I don't know if it's a green flag, but it's like, yes, you really like this person. It's a positive indicia that like this person's good. And then there's the beige flag, which is sort of in between. You're not really sure. It's a little sus, but like you don't really. So like the example I always give is if you're hanging out with somebody, it doesn't have to necessarily be on a date, but just like you're with somebody and they never ask you any questions about yourself. It's like,
that's a red flag.
Are they super well adjusted and chill, or are they like they don't really care about me? It's like it's hard to kind of figure that out.
My beige flag in other people is if they're really into their job.
Okay.
Or really into their work. Okay. Because on one end, I find that incredibly attractive that like someone is like super passionate about something that they're like dedicating their life to and their time to professionally. On the other hand, does that mean they won't have any time for me?
Yeah.
So I think it's all depends.
It's a good question. Yeah.
Person dependent and like how do they balance and prioritize the different factors and facets of their life. But it could be a red flag or it could be a complete green flag.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
What do you think about that one?
I think it can really vary, and I think it creates problems if you don't you can't sort of meaningfully evolve the relationship with the other person if they're super focused on their career. But sometimes it's better to be like I think a little bit more straightforward in terms of like what your sort of priorities are.
Totally.
Yeah. So I mean, some people are like I'm really focused on my career right now. That actually could be helpful because you're like okay, cool, like that's helpful to know. We're probably gonna have to edit that one out as well. But okay, you should ask me some questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah.
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 Well, now we're warmed up.
Now we're so warm. Yeah.
We're so warm.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Ty.
Hi, Cherie. How are you?
Thank you so much for being on Cherie's Corner podcast.
Great to be here. Yeah. It feels so interesting to be in like this corner. It's very intimate. Yeah.
Could you tell the audience what it's kind of like? What do you see that they don't see?
Well, we are currently in Cherie's house, But it is, yeah, no, it's nice. It's really, it feels very good to be here, and it feels very warm. I feel it's like a hug. It like feels very nice to be here. Yeah.
Oh, that's so
it's
lovely.
a good setup. I really like it. Yeah.
Could you please tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up, and how you grew up, and your background?
Yeah, those are like the big questions. Yeah. Well, so I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I went to school at Georgetown, and I knew I wanted to understand more about like the U.S. Legal system. Had a lot of like immigration problems randomly when I was growing up, and so I thought that like working at a law firm would actually give me like an insider kind of view into like how things actually worked. I thought that like working at a law firm would give me a lot of like practical insights into that. It did not do any of those things, actually, and it might have been because of the law firm that I worked at and the type of work that I was doing. It did something totally different and kind of brought me on this other track, but that was my initial idea.
Could you talk a little bit more about your career journey after going to Georgetown?
I went to this law firm called Cooper & Kim. It's an international law firm. I worked as an analyst for 2 years. It's a really weird position. So most law firms have like paralegals and they have associates. They don't really have analyst roles. And you're like the master of the facts on cases. So it was a really cool opportunity. I got to travel a lot. I was actually there for 4 years. So in the second 2 years that I was there, I actually built a new program at that law firm. And I think that was really what put me on the map sort of like professionally. I always kind of describe it as running a startup within a traditional international law firm, legacy law firm. That's actually how I figured out that I liked like entrepreneurship and I liked kind of setting up programs and building teams. And I transitioned to working in SF at a litigation finance fund.
Did you ask to be on that project at your first job, or was it just like by happenstance you worked on like the startup within the law firm?
I never really like asked for it. It was just an idea that I had. Built that program for them for the 2 years, pitched it. The people who ran the firm liked the idea. So that's really what I spent like the latter 2 years of that firm kind of building.
After you graduate from the GSB, do you think you still want to work in the legal tech space?
That's a great question. I think that I have a lot of like understanding and just like knowledge of legal services. There's been a lot of movement sort of just like in applying generative AI to legal services. So that's been a thesis that I've been exploring. I'm also thinking about some ideas in like the climate space, to be honest, like recently, and then also some stuff sort of like in national security. So I did a lot of work adjacent to the government when I worked at a law firm. I'm kind of interested in early stage investing as it relates to government priorities and like how do you get innovation in the hands of government actors more quickly.
Cool. So now we're going to move into some MBA questions.
Okay.
MBA specific.
Okay.
Ty.
Yeah.
Why did you want to get an MBA, and how did you think it would help you and your career?
To be honest, kind of stumbled into the MBA as like an opportunity. So I mentioned I worked at this law firm. I think I found out from that experience that I really liked entrepreneurship. I went to work in litigation finance for a period before the GSB. I kind of found out that the law was probably not the right career path for me, and I didn't want to go to law school. I didn't want to kind of honestly pursue that opportunity, but I found that I loved business and was really interested in all the opportunities. It seemed like a much wider playing field. So Stanford really and like business school was an opportunity for me to kind of like level up my skill set, get a credential, learn some like traditional business skill sets like financial modeling, all kinds of things, build a network. And I thought it would be this like sort of platform that would launch me into kind of doing the types of things that I found I was like more interested in. And if I could kind of go back in time, I never was thinking about an MBA when I was like graduating from college.
What was your application process like? Good, bad? How long did it take? Was it stressful or was it pretty smooth?
Yeah, it was actually, I think, pretty challenging. Once I realized that I wanted to go to business school, it took me actually, I think, 2.5 years to actually get accepted. So I actually applied to business schools and law schools during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I sort of like weirdly flourished in the pandemic. And I finally had the chance to like take the GRE, write my essays, get my recommendation letters together. So I applied to like a mix of law firms and law schools and also business school programs. I knew I kind of wanted to go to business school more than law school.
Yeah.
But given my background and the fact that I only worked at a law firm at that time, I thought, and I knew exactly what I would want to do in law if I did move forward with it. I would have wanted to become a prosecutor. I had some like career ideas of what I would want to achieve. I was like, I'll take the GRE and I'll split my risk. I won't have to take the LSAT and I won't have to take the GMAT. It's like instead of taking 2 tests, I'll take 1 test.
Like middle ground.
Yeah. And I think that was like maybe not the best intuition. So I took the GRE. I took it several times actually to try to get the best score I could. The final score I got, I was totally not happy with, but at a certain point I was like, I gotta move forward, I gotta apply. So I put all these things together during the pandemic, applied, and actually could not get into any school in the country. So I applied to all these different schools. It was not successful. I got waitlisted at Stanford, which was really exciting, but at the same time I wasn't sure if I'd get in or not, and I was working. And I was on the waitlist, I think, for about a year. And so I was waitlisted in round 1, heard back in round 2 that I was still on the waitlist, heard back in round 3 I was still on the waitlist.
Was this in 2021?
Yeah, it was during the pandemic in 2021. So I really wasn't sure, and it was like this paralyzing sort of anxiety because I wasn't sure, okay, do I need to actually move across like to the West Coast? At the same time, I was waitlisted at some law schools. So I would always joke with my friends, I was like the LeBron James of waitlists. Like I just could not get accepted anywhere, and just reapplied the next year in 2022. And then I got accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, and it completely changed. And so I think for me, it was really just about being persistent with the application process and being confident that it was like a super weird year with the pandemic, and I think there was a lot more interest in applying to grad schools because just like broader shifts in the market, like people didn't know what was going to happen. I told people when they asked me about applying to business school or law school, and I'm like, be super persistent. If it's your dream to do something, just go out and do it. It was my dream to go to Stanford. I think it's changed my perspective at Stanford because it took me almost 2 years to get in. So once I showed up, I was like, I got to maximize this opportunity. I got to make the most of it.
I love that story.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if there was other candidates that are like waitlisted, but if you are waitlisted, like I would just say.
Would you like to say the message?
Yeah,
to the
just
camera?
like I've been there. Like I would just say keep at it and like don't lose hope. Like I think if you have a dream, just keep going after it. So I did get a different set of recommendation letters. I rewrote my essays entirely. I learned things through the application process that informed the next time I applied, and I wrote letters to Stanford every single in advance of every single update. I don't know if they ever reviewed them. They would just say, we received your letter and like we put it on file. I don't think formally they reviewed them. I actually certainly think they maybe never read them, but I was like, I'm going to do everything I can. And I had learned all these like legal advocacy skills at this law firm. So I was like, if I'm on the wait list, like I'm going to try to apply the skills that I've learned in this legal setting to try to do the best that I can to get off. So I would say just, be persistent.
I thought that was fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I think that story will resonate with people.
Yeah.
And then also goes to show that like so much of it is like luck based too. Like who the heck knows what happened in 2021?
Yeah.
And all that matters is that you got in 2022.
I know a lot of people that got in right away and they applied to 1 or 2 schools and they got in, and honestly, power to them. But I think my approach was definitely persistence and grit and just keep applying and keep the pressure on it.
That's like a powerful lesson. What is the takeaway there? Like, is there
honestly,
something in like
persistence,
believing in yourself or not?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it works out in every instance. It worked out for me. I think that year objectively was super weird. And so I tried to kind of have a combination of this like belief in my own capability to reapply and improve and like execute on some of the things I was saying in my essay, which was like I really wanted to be on the West Coast. I really wanted to work with startups. I actually did all of those things during the pandemic, so I should totally change jobs. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. So I kind of backed up some of the things that I was saying in the application with what I was doing in terms of my actual professional life.
Which was different from the first time around.
Different from the first time. So that could have been part of the shift. It's like that credible commitment mechanism of like, okay, you're saying all these things in the essay, but like how much of a step are you actually doing towards achieving these things? And the other part is sort of like looking at objectively, I think, like certain components of your application and be like, okay, I maybe need to bump up my test scores. I like retook the GRE, got different recommendations. There's like these like mechanical aspects of the application I think you have to work through.
I mean,
the combination of those I think delivers good results. Yeah.
It's not like you reapplied with the same thing. You like made
changes. Yeah.
Big changes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wrote them a ton of letters. So at least like I think people. I hope that people like don't just like flood the admissions offices with letters, but I think honestly like hustle and just like making it happen can be like a big unlock for a lot of people.
To anyone who's applying, is there any more like generally, is there any advice that you'd want to give people who are working on applications now?
I think most people's careers, unless they worked at really, really sort of like brand name institutions, may not necessarily make sense. And I think a lot of people that I talk to are like, oh, my resume objectively, like if another person looks at it externally, it doesn't have a lot of sort of coherency. And so I would say don't pull yourself out of the application pool because you're a non-traditional applicant or maybe you don't have like big brands on your resume. If you have a lot of skills and you have people that can vouch for you, and will write really great recommendation letters, and you believe that you have a compelling narrative that you can present to a business school, I would go ahead and apply and just like put your name in the hat. Like you miss every shot you don't take, sort of. So like go ahead and apply, see what happens. If it doesn't work out the first time, per my story, like apply again, improve your profile, do different things. And I think that is a big unlock. I'd say the second thing is that even if you don't have like the perfect GRE, or you have the perfect essay or the perfect set of recommendations, figure out what are the components of your application where you're like spiky, like you're really, really strong, and don't worry too much about your blemishes or your weak spots. Just like really nail down what are your strengths. So like for me, I knew that my test scores were not going to be my strength. That was just objectively not going to be an area where I excelled. And I'm pretty transparent about that. But what I knew I was really great at was I had done a lot of really innovative things in the legal profession as a non-attorney professional. I knew I had great recommendation letters. I knew I could write really well and have a compelling narrative. So I think you find other aspects of your application where if an admissions officer is like reading it, they can kind of pick it off the table, and it immediately is like, boom, okay, this is a good application. This is a strong application. And they're only going to read it for like 10 or 15 minutes reasonably. So I would say you have to spend a lot of time working it. So for my applications, I think someone told me to write my essays like 18 to 19 drafts. I probably did like 50 or 60 drafts, to be honest. It took 2 years of like refining the story and really fixing it and really understanding what mattered most to me and internal reflection. I think admissions officers are really smart, and they can kind of tell what is authentic and what is not authentic.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to really dig deep for these like sort of elite institutions and go through the process and reflect, and you'll get a lot of value from that outside of the application process. Totally. And also don't beat yourself up if you don't get in. There's always opportunities for people, and I think going to a school like Stanford does unlock a lot of career opportunities, but it's not the only way to achieve success. There's people that, I mean, that's somewhat obvious, but like there's so many different things that you could be doing with your time. So it's a very unique, like going to business school in many ways is like a very unique and like privileged sort of opportunity.
You're so well spoken, Ty.
I don't know if that's the right way to frame it.
You could totally be an attorney.
Really,
prosecuting attorney right here.
Maybe, yeah.
Ty, what has been your favorite class this last year?
Yeah, I think my favorite was actually managerial skills. So it's a class that you take in your first quarter at Stanford, and basically you role play a lot of like very practical business situations. So you deal with like employees that are really upset, you deal with like VCs, you deal with investors, you deal with all these different situations that are sort of like somewhat connected to like your interpersonal skills, but are somewhat like professional. And I think they bring in professors that are kind of like very, very experienced, that have a lot of industry experience, and you do a lot of role playing in the class. And so you actually see some of your classmates like act out certain situations, and that kind of gives you a different perspective, because you're like, oh, I wouldn't have handled it that way. And so that was a really cool experience. I thought that was a very practical class, and like something that I came to business school to learn. I really liked also my finance and accounting classes, weirdly. I thought those were helpful.
Ty.
Yeah.
What have you learned about yourself in the last year?
I've learned that I am in many ways more resilient than I realized. So I feel like kind of looking back on my career, looking back on things I'm doing at Stanford, there's been a lot of moments where there were challenges, and like it required a lot of resiliency. And I keep finding myself going back to those things as I encounter new challenges. I've learned that I actually have this sort of like deep well of like resilience or like grit that I can kind of go back to, and I know it's there. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm tougher than I realized. Yeah.
How do you go back to that? What does that exactly mean?
I mean,
is it like meditation or journaling or something just like more? Is that more of like a metaphor?
I think it's just reminding yourself that you've been in situations that were far worse in the past, and you were able to kind of break through those things. Challenges in the problem sets have gotten more complex. It's no longer like you do well on this exam or you excel at this assignment at work. It's a little bit more in the gray area, like how can I get this business off the ground? How can I convince people to join my company? How can I make 500 grand of revenue in a certain year? Or like how do I expand or grow this business line? So I think as the challenge sets get harder, it's more important to have like a true growth mindset, where when you're getting feedback from external factors, so like, okay, this is useful data as to what's working well and what isn't. and you're not importing that data as like a reflection of like your own self. It does give you a lot of ideas of like how you're performing. Like when I did this assignment, it did not go well, but not personalizing those things and like making them sort of a reflection of your identity. I think most people in general, they may think of themselves as like, I am a diligent person, or I am a hardworking person, or I am someone who's passionate about X, or I am very skilled at Y. But if you're doing new things, you're pivoting, you're going to be bad initially. You're actually very bad in a lot of instances. You might be a great founder and you have this superpower. You're amazing at setting up like legal tech services, but maybe you're not good at hiring, or maybe you have other things that are coming up. And so I think the big thing for me as I kind of hit my late 20s is realizing there's all these areas that I'm functionally not skilled in, and that's okay. And I'm no longer playing a game of chess where I have to like plan out every strategic move. I'm more playing like Tetris, which is like there's like a friend of mine uses this analogy, but like there's blocks coming down and you just have to figure out what blocks do I have and how do I fit this piece into this piece. And it's a little bit less linear in nature.
I love that.
Yeah.
These are great answers.
I don't know if that's helpful, but I think the challenges are getting harder. It's no longer like achieve X or Y. There's 10 or 20 things going on. It could be your personal life, could be family. At the same time, maybe you're trying to grow a venture-backed business. You have to hit certain milestones. So there's like concrete pressures, but you're kind of balancing that. If you're brittle in any way or you don't have a growth mindset, you'll just get crushed in that environment. And I felt like I was not doing very well my first year at Stanford in terms of confronting those things. And I think this summer has actually been a big help for me to kind of come to terms with I'm going to be bad at a lot of stuff on the way to like achieving what I want to do in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. That is growth mindset.
Yeah. But it's hard. It's every day.
So Ty, could you tell me a little bit more about what you're working on this summer?
Yeah. So I'm working actually with a classmate of ours. His name is Alex Wu. And he actually has been running this business for about 1.5 years. He runs a fractional CFO firm. We serve like Series A through Series C clients. We help them with all their like operating finance needs. It's been totally awesome to like work with great founders, work with the VCs, work with these great startups and like help them achieve whatever like financial objective that they're looking for. I'd say a big thing for me that's like been a big unlock for the summer, and I don't know if you feel this way, Cherie, but it's like, how can you be helpful for the people around you? And I think that has been such a big unlock in a lot of ways, because all of our classmates are starting companies and like they have questions. And so if you're just like someone who's known as being knowledgeable and can help them and like can maybe like review a deck that they're preparing for a VC, or maybe like help them with like building their operating model.
So for any startup founders who are watching this podcast and need help in the CFO space, should they reach out to you? Or,
if you're like a pre-seed company, and obviously at this point like you probably don't need a full-time CFO, definitely reach out. I think we are really helpful and like have helped like a ton of clients like hit their objectives and their milestones.
Cool. And what is the email they should reach out to?
Just go to our website, cfoadvisors.com. It's also our Wi-Fi password in our home, so we're constantly building the brand. But
that is so Silicon Valley.
It's very Silicon Valley. Yeah, we won't let you forget. But CFO Advisors is awesome, and like Alex is an incredible person, and like a really he's amazing at what he does. So like I think it's been a really cool summer. Yeah.
Cool. Yes, and so we'll include the link to CFO Advisors in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Cherie's Corner with Ty, and we'll see you soon. Bye! Thank you for tuning in for this episode and this season of Cherie's Corner. And that concludes season 1. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in seeing a season 2. I'm currently creating a calendar and schedule of people I want to invite onto season 2 of Cherie's Corner, and I've heard you and read your comments. I'm trying to find business school classmates to be on my podcast who have experience in consulting, finance, and or family business. I'm in the process right now of formulating the lineup and creating new questions, so if you have any questions that you want me to ask, please let me know in the comments below. I'd really appreciate if you could share Cherie's Corner with a friend who would find this content helpful. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. I'll see you very soon. Let's get to the takeaways. Here are the main takeaways from this episode with Ty. The first is his story of how he applied to business school programs twice. I think it happens more often than we think, and it's not really a narrative or a story that's told publicly often at all. I think psychologically there's a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance that's involved when applying to business school a second time when you don't get into your dream school the first time. I love the way that Ty put it. There are places where you're weaker in your application, and there are places where you stand out and are incredibly spiky. How do you figure out ways to double down on those parts of your application so those shine through to the admissions committee? It's important to realize that Ty didn't use the same application the first year as he did in the second year. He redid his entire application from his essays to his recommenders, and he thinks that made a really big difference in the application process. The second big learning from this podcast episode is that developing interpersonal skill requires repetition. Ty's favorite classes were touchy-feely and managerial skills, and these are classes where you act out situations so you can get comfortable feeling the feelings and going through the motion of a situation. If you're terrified of public speaking, I hate to break it to you, you have to try public speaking even more to get used to it. Put yourself in those positions to get as many reps as possible, and I promise you, practice makes perfect. And the last takeaway for me is how much I enjoyed filming this podcast series. I think when you're looking at people's LinkedIn bios, you're scrolling through the statistics, you don't really get a feel of who they are or what they care about. And Cherie's Corner is all about shining a light on my classmates who I'm actually obsessed with, who are funny, caring, thoughtful human beings, and also, very accomplished in the professional world. And I'm just so happy that I get to spend time with them, be a little bit silly like in this podcast, and really show you guys what it's like applying to business school programs, what it's like succeeding in business school programs, failing, making mistakes, learning from them, and how we're kind of all just growing together on this journey. I'm really happy with how this podcast series turned out, and thank you guys so much for being here. Let's get it for season 2. I'll see you later. Bye.